Hi, Robin online.
Hi, Robin. Welcome on the line. We're just about to start the meeting. I'll do a roll call right away.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Tina Nybo Jensen, and I'm Senior Coordinator Governance Relation at GRI. Welcome to this meeting of the Global Sustainability Standards Board, known by its acronym, the GSSB, held on the 21st of July 2016. This virtual meeting is being hosted from the GRI Secretariat Office in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Please know that all public GSSB meeting are being recorded, and you can find the audio recording on the GSSB webpage, along with high-level summaries of previous GSSB meetings. Present from the GRI Secretariat today are Pamela Carpio, Senior Coordinator Governance Relation, Laura Espinach, Manager Standards Division, Chelsea Reinhardt, Deputy Director Standards Division, and Bastian Book, Director Standards Division. And we'll now start with a roll call. Mr. Daniel Tayong.
Yes, I'm present, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. David Russell.
I'm here.
Good. Mr. Dwight Justice.
Here.
Miss Judy Kuszewski.
Here, good afternoon.
Mr. Jürgen Buxbaum.
I'm present, hello.
Miss Kirsten Margrethe Hovey.
Yes, I'm present.
Mr. Robin Atme.
Yes, hello.
Mr. Stian van Draak.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Vadakapatnan Kumar.
Good afternoon, present.
And Mr. Michael Nugent, Vice Chair of the GSSB.
Present.
Thank you, everyone. And we would just like to note that GSSB members Mr. Hidemi Tumita and Ms. Sulema Pioli will be joining us later during the call, and GSSB members Mr. Daniel Ingram and Mr. Simeon Cheng send their apologies to this meeting. And I'll now hand over to Bastian Book.
Thank you, Tina, and also welcome from me. We're starting this meeting, this formal note from the Standards Division to the GSSB for the record that the chair of the GSSB, and you have been informed about that by email, Eric Hespenheide, has stepped down. He has assumed responsibilities as the interim chief executive for GRI, and consequently he has stepped down with immediate effect as a chair of the GSSB and resigned from the GSSB. Fortunately, our vice chair, Michael Nugent, has stepped in, and he will lead the discussions of the GSSB in these crucial next weeks through the project that we are involved in. The Independent Appointments Committee has started a process to look into nominations for a new chair of the GSSB. No decisions have been taken, no nominations have been made so far, but these proceedings have started immediately with Eric Hespenheide resigning as the chair of the GSSB.
Bastian, we can barely hear you. I'm not sure if others are having the same problem.
No, I'm having a worse problem. I can't really hear you at all, Bastian.
We can't hear.
I don't hear well.
I was hearing okay. Bastian, can you speak more closely to the microphone?
Is this better?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So let me start again. Just for the record, we would like to formally inform you that Eric Hespenheide has stepped down as the chair of the GSSB. You have received an email to that extent 2 weeks ago. He has assumed the role as interim chief executive of the GRI and consequently resigned from the GSB and stepped down as the chair of the GSSB. Michael Nugent, the vice chair of the GSB, has for now assumed the responsibility for leading the GSSB through these crucial weeks of the transition to standards and all other deliberations that you will have in the coming weeks until such point that the Independent Appointments Committee will have nominated a new and confirmed a new chair for the GSSB. The Independent Appointments Committee has started to look into this. but there are no conclusions reached yet on nominations, and we will inform you in due course once they have come forward with a nomination for the chair of the GSSB. I leave it at that. I think at the in-person meeting that we will have in August later, we will have ample time to also thank Eric Hestenheider for his work for the GSSB. He will be present in Amsterdam, and we can certainly invite him to join a part of the meeting of the GSB there.
Bastian, this is Judy.
Yes.
I just wanted to say, I mean, first of all, I'm extremely grateful to Michael to stepping into the role, and also to Eric for stepping up as the interim chief executive at GRI. I wondered if there was a view at this point as to the length of this interim period, and whether, I don't know, might Eric at some point come back to us? I don't know if we have a view on any of that yet, and maybe we talk about it a bit in August.
Well, these are, we have no formal notice yet from the IAC on how long these proceedings will take. But I think by August we will have an indication how they are looking at a schedule for nominating a new chair. It might possibly coincide also with the nomination, the regular nomination of new members of the GSSB towards the end of the calendar year, but this has not been determined yet.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Bastian. It's Michael Nugent here. Well, as Bastian said, Eric has assumed the role of temporary CEO of GRI, but I think it's entirely fitting and appropriate that we start this meeting, even though we'll be speaking with Eric later at our August meeting. Start this meeting by recording our sincere gratitude to Eric for his quite masterful leadership as chair of the GSSB, particularly through the early stages of the transition phase, and acknowledge our debt to him for his major role in getting us this far, and of course wishing him the best of luck in his new role as interim CEO of the GRI. I guess I'd like to propose that we minute such a resolution. Could I ask people if they would be in favour of such? Sorry, just before I do that, could I just ask the people, I believe, who can see the notes section of this call, well, the people who can't see the notes section of this call, I think are Dwight, Kirsten, and that might be all, but if there are others, please let me know. Otherwise, could others just signal their intent to speak using the notes section? Maybe to Dwight and or Kirsten, who I don't think can see the notes section, would you like to say anything?
Hello?
Dwight?
Yes, did you ask me something?
Could you not hear me, Dwight? Sorry.
I'm at a disadvantage with this telephone, and it would help if people spoke close to the mic.
Okay. Dwight, I was suggesting that we pass a resolution of gratitude basically to Eric. I think that you can't see the screen, yeah, and therefore can't sort of put into the conversation section your intent to speak, which I've asked people to do who can see the screen. Yes. So I was asking you and Kirsten, both of you can't see the screen, I believe, whether you had anything to say about a resolution, just whether you supported such a resolution.
Yes, I think it would be an excellent idea, and I support it, and I think we all owe a lot of gratitude to Eric, because he is the kind of chair that has the skills and the integrity to do this kind of job, and I certainly would want to support a resolution to that effect.
Thank you, Dwight. I can see that Judy, David, and Kumar all support such a resolution, fully in support. Here, such the comments that we're getting. Would anyone else like to speak to the resolution, or shall we accept that by consensus?
Michael Robin speaking. Just to let you know that I've connected through the phone, so I don't have access to the note section either.
Thank you.
Michael, it's Stian. I certainly support it as well.
Okay, thank you, Stian. And Daniel Talent has said that he also supports it. So I think if in the minutes, if we could record such a motion as being passed by consensus. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So shall we move on to the agenda of the meeting, which is the next slide. Okay, so we're starting the formal meeting with a welcome, everybody, of course, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and approval of the previous meeting summary. That has been distributed, I believe. Hopefully everyone has received that. We have 15 minutes allotted for that. Perhaps it won't take that long. Does anyone have any comments on the previous minutes, previous summary?
You can bring them.
Sorry, Stian, did you accept?
Yes, I'm in support. Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Stay
Does
with
anyone
me,
have
Robin.
any? Robin, you're in support?
Yep.
I won't go around the table. I will ask the people who don't have access to the notes section, though. So, Kirsten and Dwight, do you support approval of the previous
I support.
summary? Kirsten?
I support Kristen here.
Thank you. And, okay, if anyone else has any comments, could they put them there in the conversation section? I think everyone is putting in that they support that. So can we record that they were passed by consensus, please? Okay, well, that was pretty easy first section. Maybe now, the bulk of our meeting now is about the initial feedback from the public comment period. And Chelsea, I think you're going to lead this off. So maybe we go on to the next slide and pass over to Chelsea.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for stepping up as interim chair here. We are all very grateful. So this session is a run through the high-level feedback that we've had already from the public comment period. So a couple of weeks ago, we shared the initial sort of main themes that were emerging from the stakeholder workshops. Since then, we have closed the public comment period officially first thing Monday morning, and we've had a very busy 3.5 days here in Amsterdam trying to go through the brunt of the feedback that's come in through the consultation platform, the typed up workshop notes from 15 workshops around the world, and also any offline submissions that came through during the comment period. So what I want to do today is to share with you a high-level overview of what we've heard, but we're also going to ask for some decisions or directional feedback from the GSSB today on key issues that will allow us to make changes as we revise and draft the next set of documents for your review in upcoming weeks. So the main things that we want to get your feedback on are issues that will affect multiple standards or the overarching structure, format, or language used across numerous documents. We will be marking for the GSSB more specific, smaller points that relate to individual standards as we go through that review cycle on Annotate beginning next Wednesday already. So just an overview of feedback. We had on the online platform a total of, can we just ask for you to mute if you're on the call? Thank you. We had a total of 510 registrations, so those are individuals that registered for the online platform and that were actively looking at documents. We had a total of 89 submissions of official feedback coming in through that platform. That represented submissions from 30 countries, including 47 of those were organizational responses or responses on behalf of multiple organizations in some cases. And in total, we had 780 questionnaires completed, plus 172 additional PDF comments coming in from the online platform. That's in addition to feedback we had from the 15 workshops around the world, and in total we had over 350 participants in those workshops and over 100 pages of cumulative detailed notes coming out of those workshops. So overall, I would say we had less feedback than the comparative G4 process, but it's a lot of feedback. It's plenty for us to work with, and we've had some very insightful, detailed comments by and large. So the majority of feedback coming through actually represents I would say a very informed stakeholder viewpoint, and we've spent quite a bit of time going through individual comments. So high level summary, hopefully some of you had time to read through this before the call. Generally the feedback's been positive on the whole. We've had only one or two comments that are critical of the move to standards. The vast majority are quite positive. They understand the rationale, and we've had a lot of enthusiastic feedback about modular structure and also the edits for clarity and accessibility. We did have some concerns about user friendliness of spreading out the content across multiple PDF documents, and we'll talk more about that later. Concerns that there's no one place to go to find all of the content related to some of the main concepts, that you can't search the full set of content, concerns like that. Looking at the third bullet point here, feedback on the SRS reference claims, we had very mixed feedback here. Largely from the workshops, we had a number of concerns that this third option could lead to cherry picking or selective use of disclosures and could produce a lower quality of reporting. However, we are noting that the feedback coming in through the online platform and the workshops is from a subset of stakeholders, of GRI stakeholders. These are existing G4 reporters, and they are experienced practitioners or consultants. So the viewpoint you're not hearing in that feedback are our new potential market of new reporters, SMEs, those who are going to be reporting for the first time based on EU non-financial reporting directive and others in that camp. We picked up a number of good suggestions on how to make the documents more streamlined and navigable. And these suggestions we've had from workshops and from the platform over the last 8 weeks. So we've already incorporated a number of these suggestions, and I would say the documents are getting better and better thanks to the hard work of the team here. We have shortened the introduction sections. We've added more hyperlinks. We've given more overview of contents to help people navigate the standards. And the last sort of main point here in the feedback summary, generally we've had a positive approach to the management approach. I would say we were expecting more concerns about the extent of content in there now, but we've also had many requests to see an even more simpler explanation of the topic boundary, and we have some time at the end of today's call to go through our proposed revised approaches to topic boundary, and Jenny from the Standards Department will also talk about a little bit of internal research we've been doing on how companies are currently reporting against topic boundary. So overall comments on the format, structure, and design. We've just given you a couple of sound bites to support some of the high-level feedback. Of course, we'll make all of the comments available for the GSSB to review. But generally, we've had good feedback on the structure. There were comments from workshops as well as from the online platform that the introduction sections in the exposure drafts were lengthy and duplicative, particularly for those who would be using multiple standards. We have done a heavy edit. These are now significantly shorter and more focused. We've tried to lose as many words as we can while keeping the main points. And we've also clarified in the introduction for each standard how that particular document fits into the overall set. So SRS 402 market presence is one of the topic-specific standards in the economic category. That was probably missing information that we should have had in the exposure drafts, and that was picked up quite quickly. With the thanks to Jack and to Sarah from our department, we've done an overhaul of the background context sections to try and standardize them across the documents. So we haven't lost content here, but in some cases we've moved some text from the background context into guidance that will sit next to disclosures. They now are much more succinct and they're more consistent across the documents. That was a big piece of work. I think they look substantially better. We've also standardized the order of guidance across the documents. We had mixed feedback from users asking, some of them wanted to see guidance next to every recommendation or requirement, but the majority of feedback we had here was asking for a consistent flow of hierarchy of information. So they wanted to see requirement, recommendation, guidance consistently across the documents.
We've now reworked that in the template so that that is more consistent, and we will mark those changes for GSSB reviewers. The last point here is that there is a call to more clearly emphasize, in particular in the design versions that we were socializing at the workshops, the distinction between requirements versus recommendations and guidance. Jack in particular has done a tremendous amount of work with our design agency to work through alternative versions, and I've given you a snapshot or preview. These are still in progress, but we have now shaded and bolded reporting requirements as opposed to recommendations or guidance. The feedback we've had on these versions, we've been workshopping them over the last sort of 4 to 5 workshops, and we've had increasingly positive feedback from users. And we've also more clearly located the disclosure numbers and names together. So we are working on these, but we are confident that they've been road tested and that they will be more user-friendly than the versions that were out to consultation. Overarching comments on usability. So as I mentioned at the beginning, and we anticipated this a little bit even before the public comment period, there is a general appreciation for why we're moving to a modular approach, but we did have comments concerned about how particularly frequent users of the standards are going to be interacting with multiple PDFs. So a lot of people quite like having all of the content together in G4 guidelines and being able to bring it all into one place to search it and to pull out different sections as needed. There were also commenters who noted that some of our key concepts, so materiality, the topic boundary, actually are split across the universal standards. And if you really want to see everything on materiality or the topic boundary, you would have to consult all 3 documents. So we had 2 suggestions that came up through the course of workshops or through the online feedback. One suggestion was that we actually go back to looking at a combined document, but that each individual topic becomes a section, which could be updated individually, similar to having separate standards with an updated date for each section. Or that GRI should invest in an online tool similar to the G4 online tool we have now, which would allow users to select, view, and download customized content. So they could select, I want to see just these 6 standards recombined without the introduction content, or maybe even I want to see just the requirements and recommendations for these 6 standards without the guidance. We would have to think about what that looks like. So our proposal that we're putting out to the GSSB would be actually to at least work on developing a mock-up of combining the first 3 universal standards into a single universal standard with separate sections. We would, of course, leave all the topics as separate modular standards. Some of the rationale behind this is that we think it would reduce duplication across those first 3 standards. It would improve usability, and it would be significantly easier to explain to users because you would have one set of requirements in the first standard that applies to all organizations, and then you can pick and choose from the remainder based on materiality. It would eliminate the need to consult multiple different documents to find some of the core requirements on materiality or the boundary. But we believe it would still preserve the main benefits of the modular approach in terms of being able to update independent topics. As we've gone through the process of revision and updating over the last couple of weeks, we've also realized that it will be very challenging, if not impossible, to update the 3 universal standards independently in the future without having to update all of them because there's so much overlap and cross-referencing of different disclosures or sections in the first 3. In the longer term, I think we are very much in agreement that we would like to develop an online tool, regardless of the decision taken on this first bullet point, that would allow users to combine and download content. Definitely we're getting asked this at almost every workshop we ran, but this is going to take a significant time and resource investment from our small standards division, and that will take resources away from other priorities, of which you know we have a long list. So I would pause there and turn it over to Michael. We are hoping to get some input or strategic, if not a decision, at least a directional decision from the GSSB at this point, because this will allow us to work on documents over the rest of this week following that input. So Michael, I'll turn it over to you at this point, and then we'll pick up the rest of the feedback in a moment.
Okay, thanks, Chelsea. Can I just check, David, I can see has a comment, and I'll ask you to, or a question, I'll ask you to articulate that in a second. But I think we now also have Hadimi and Salima online. Salima, are you online? We didn't hear you, Salima, if you are there. Salima, are you online? Okay, can I just ask Tina to check whether Salima's online? And also, Hadimi, are you online?
Michael, are you asking if I'm online? This is Lema.
Sorry, and you're on by phone, is that correct?
Hello? This is
Hello,
Lema. I'm having problems to listen. The sound is very, very, very bad, but I'm online.
Okay, thank you. And Hadimi, are you online?
Thank you.
I'm pretty sure Hadimi's online, but has a lot of background noise, so maybe choosing not to answer right at the moment. Yes, he is there. Okay, I can see a note that he's there, but he cannot talk. Okay, so for those who have a question or a comment on this section, please put their names on the note section. But I'm going to pass to David first, as I know he has a question. Please, David.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, my question is a very simple one. So if we were to go ahead with this proposal, then if at some point we wanted to update the content, say, of 201, we would in fact update that, but then publish the whole new document, which is 101, 201, and 301 as a new version. Is that correct?
I would expect that's correct, although I imagine we would call it probably then just 101 as a consolidated document.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, feedback from others. I'm going to ask people who are on the phone only. Kirsten, do you have anything that you would like to add to the discussion?
No, I'm fine with it so far.
Okay, thank you. Dwight?
Not right now.
Okay. Robin?
No, not for me.
Okay. Judy, you've got a question I can see.
Yes, sort of a bit of a question and a comment. I've got some printed out copies of the draft 101, 201, and 301 in front of me, just to take a look and see what would it be like if they were all together in a single document. I'm a bit concerned that putting them all together in a way defeats the purpose of separating them, if that makes any sense, that they are suddenly kind of less accessible, the variety of very detailed concepts that are contained inside each of those three draft standards. I do understand the argument in favor of doing so, but I wanted to just get a little bit more of a view from the Secretariat about what the impact would be of having the three in one, and whether there are drawbacks that they can see as well as benefits to it. Thank you.
Just before you answer that, Chelsea, can I ask Daniel? I know you've got a comment. Could you ask your comment, please?
Yeah, no, just listening. I don't have the documents in front of me at the moment, and so I don't remember exactly what they look like in extent, but I rather like the idea of combining the universal aspects of the standard. I also very much like the idea of users being able to access the entire set. I'm that sort of person that likes to see the entire tool together. And maybe if that's solvable through an internet platform where you can check the boxes of the sections you want to see, that might be a good solution. So I'm all for finding a way to present the standards that's user-friendly in that aspect.
Okay. Nankuma, did you want to say something?
Here.
Sorry, Michael, I have already put my comments that I support the combining the 101, 201 and 301. One is that people need to download only once, and as and when the changes occur, they are all in one place. And second thing is that multiple referencing could be avoided by combining. So I support for a single universal standard. Thank you.
Okay, and Kirsten, thank you, Nankuma. Kirsten?
While I absolutely supported the approach of having 3 different documents, I have seen during the consultation period when I've received questions from different people, and also while we have been working on a recommendation from the Oslo Stock Exchange on reporting on corporate responsibility, I've seen that it can be quite challenging to find where in which of these 3 standards you can find different information. So I do realize that the comments that have come in now are really relevant, and under DUBT I do support putting the 3 documents together in one, merging them, so that it will be easier to find some of the information. I do believe it will be easier when you get the complete overview, and it will also be easier to search then in the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Chelsea, could I ask you to respond to Judy's question, please, about implications, positive and negative?
Sure, Judy. I think the first implication is it's a bit more work in the short term for the team here, but not significantly at this point in time. Two drawbacks, and I'll speak personally and ask if anyone else in the room has anything to add. The first is that it will be a longer document than SRS 101. So when you bring in particularly the content in 201, it gets longer. And that defeats a little bit the intent to have a very short entry-level sort of document, which is the starting point for SRS 101. But I think for regular users of the standard, the usability benefits will outweigh that. And the fact that we have so many regular users of the standards who really need to be able to find content together, it will also mean that they're less likely to overlook references to materiality, for example, or to the topic boundary, which are buried in the middle of 201, because these can be found all together in the same document. A second drawback, or a positive, but has been raised by 1 or 2 commenters as a drawback, is we had 1 or 2 people who expressed a view that they like having the management approach as a separate standard because they think it will give it more emphasis, and that if we make it a separate section of the first standard, it's potentially you could lose that emphasis. Anything you want to add? Okay. I think that sums it up, Michael.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Judy, could you have a comment?
Yes, I simply wanted to pick up on the point that Chelsea raised, that the effort that we made to kind of split apart some of these concepts was intended to clarify them, call them out, make them stand out a bit better, make the whole thing kind of make it clearer what is contained altogether across the suite of GRI standards. My concern is that if we put these very, very difficult, important, really essential concepts all together into a single document, we do in fact risk losing the visibility of them individually. And to me, I'm just a little concerned that we wouldn't be doing our reporters the greatest service by doing that. Thank you.
Okay, is anyone who has not commented to date like to comment on this issue?
It's Dwight. I find this a very good question, and I am not sure what my response is, but I want to join those that are a little concerned about some of the value being lost of separating this. And in particular, I sort of think that the management's the management disclosure idea deserves sort of a separate treatment. but that's for right now. I'm still leaning towards not combining, but on the other hand, I can see that might be what we would have to do. But right now, I'm sort of concerned.
Okay, thanks, Dwight. Anyone else has a comment?
Jürgen speaking. Frankly, I do not see much advantage as for user friendliness if we combine it. But on the other hand, I do not oppose. If we think according to the comments from all the different stakeholders, if they want to combine, I would not oppose. Although I do not see much advantage.
Thank you, Jürgen. Others?
David here. Yeah, I'm too am a little bit uneasy with this, and I think in order to really get a good feel for what this would, which version would be better, I'd like to see an example of the combined document before I supported it.
Thank you, David. Stian?
Michael, it's Stian. I understand the reasoning that Chelsea presented here of combining them, but also find it challenging to envisage how it will work and the amount of work that will go in updating these. So supporting David there, if it is at all possible, to see what a combined version would look like without putting too much strain on the Secretariat.
Thanks, Stian.
Michael, this is Selema. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. We can, Selema. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to apologize because I'm having problems here. We in the area we don't have power enough to keep a good connection. But I also want to say that I do support Dave and the others that want to see an example in order to decide about a combined version or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, are there other comments? Okay. I guess from a personal point of view, I'm also in that same camp. I'm a bit concerned about separating them out because we'll have a rather large document that will be a combination of principles and concepts as well as disclosures. I wonder whether, like others, I'd like to see an example. I understand, Chelsea and Bastian, that puts excess strain on the team doing that when in fact we may choose not to go ahead with it. But is that possible, Chelsea? And also, can I ask, is there a third alternative, perhaps having the management approach as a separate document, which are all disclosures, and having the more conceptual issues in one document? I can see a distinction between the management approach, which is disclosure, and the other things in 1, 2, and 3.
Kirsten here.
Yeah.
You are actually coming up with the same suggestion that I was thinking about. Would it be possible to combine 101 and 201 and then keep 301 as a separate document? Thank you.
Thank you. Chelsea, could you maybe respond?
Yeah, that's definitely possible. That's just a different copy-paste editing exercise. I think it's useful for us to get, Michael, maybe just a general sense or sense check of the feedback from the group before we can certainly mock up an example or two. But if most people are opposed to the idea, then I think you can probably envision roughly what that will look like to combine the content. You know what the content is. If we have a pretty good appetite, but you want to see an example, then I think we should go ahead and put an example together. If people are quite skeptical, I don't know that an example is worth investing the time in. We're quite happy then. This is GSSB's input. If you want them to stay separate, we can leave them separate. So we can certainly combine 101 and 201. You would then still have reporting principles as well as disclosures in that standard, but it would have the benefit of keeping the management approach as a separate standard to be used together with the topic standards. And maybe that's a middle ground.
Could I ask then just what was the strength of feeling? I mean, I know you've related it to an extent already, but what was the strength of feeling amongst the feedback you've got about whether this is something that people would really find helpful or not? Was it very strong, the feeling in the community?
I would say it's quite strong, but the alternative is that we keep them separate. We develop this online tool, and most users simply create their own version, which brings it all together into one document. I certainly think usability, if you actually sit down and try and look through the first 3 standards to put all the bits together where you need to read about and apply or report on topic boundary, you are looking in 3 different standards in about 5-6 different places. Now we can try and restructure that, but that's quite a lot of work to restructure that across the foundation standard, and then you would still end up with disclosures in that first standard. Or we can use, and we are already using hyperlinks or cross-references, but you still will have to navigate through 3 different documents. So I think it's an important thing for the GSSB to think through, and how much we want to give things separate emphasis versus how much we want to aid the user experience. But the second option is we prioritize development of this online tool. Most users actually will create their own combined version. Maybe that's perfectly fine.
Can I weigh in here? This is Daniel.
Please do.
Yeah, so maybe the solution is simply a technological solution where, again, we make, if that's even available, that the user can simply pick and choose which sections they want to see together and print out their own version however they want to see it, but we maintain it as is online and allow that combination through a technological platform.
Thanks, Daniel. Judy, did you want to add something?
Yes, maybe this is, I'm having a little trouble with this conversation because I'm not sure I have a really good idea in my head about what these things are that people have to keep switching back and forth between 3 different documents to keep track of. I understand that materiality is referenced really throughout the GRI standards. To some extent, I suppose that's probably one of them. So I'm not quite sure how to evaluate the need to bring it all together versus the value of keeping them separate and individually emphasized. The other thing that I would just point out about the online tool, which I absolutely agree we should do, but let's not forget that as people create their own documents, they will, in effect, be bringing together a lot of separate documents into one, and it still has to be very clear, and have a lot of integrity between the various sections to make sure that their individual utility and value doesn't get lost by the simple fact of combining them into a single document. I think some of this is really subtle and is just you won't really kind of understand it until you've experienced it, what kind of an impact it has on readers to put information together versus keep it separate. What that actually looks like could actually have more of an impact on the user experience and on the value that people attach to it than we might be imagining. I am concerned that the kind of just ability to pull things together will turn it all back into the old sort of G3, G4 all-in-one sort of documents, and you get the effect of people sort of have a combined document with materiality and principles and standard disclosures and so forth, and you get the kind of skip kind of effect that we've had in the past with some of that information, as much as we try to prevent it. So that's I'll stop there. I think I've probably said enough on this topic right now, but thank you.
Thanks, Judy. I guess, Chelsea, what I'm hearing is that there may be some appetite for combining 100 and 200, less so for putting 300 in, if I'm getting the numbers correct, that 300 is the management approach. I also don't have it in front of me, so it's finding it difficult to see what it might look like. Is it a lot of work to combine 1 and 2, or is that simply a cut and paste that could be done reasonably quickly?
We can mock up a lightly edited version that cuts and pastes and makes some indication where you would need probably a little bit of bridging text. But I do take on board Judy's point as well, that if we allow people, if we publish them separately and allow people to just pick and choose and recombine content, you might lose actually the nice bridging text or editing structure that we could put together that improves the usability of having them together or separate. But certainly we can mock that up, Michael, if that's useful, and try and share that sometime next week.
Well, that I think would be a good idea if we can do that. Just from what I'm hearing, I can also see that I think Judy would probably support that, and Hidemi, who's having difficulty speaking, would support looking at that combined 100 and 200, but less so on the 300. So can we move forward on that basis?
Okay.
Kirsten here.
Yes, please, Kirsten.
Just one more comment. If we would need to prioritize here, and of course we always need to prioritize, a good technical solution would of course be the most important from my point of view. As far as I know, to create a good download center shouldn't be too work intensive and too expensive, which would make the reporting organizations be able to put together the different elements they need in one PDF and then be able to do a good search. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Actually, could I also make a comment on that about the tool? I must admit, I'm a little nervous about a tool that allows people to pick and choose too much, because particularly if they can choose requirements and ignore the recommendations and or the guidance, then again, I guess the same point as Judy was making, they might get some of the story, but not all of it. But I guess that's a bridge we need to cross as we get further into what that tool looks like. So does anyone have any further comments on this section? If not, let's move ahead. Chelsea, please.
Okay, so just to confirm, we will develop a mocked up version combining 101 and 201. We'll leave for now 301 as a separate standard, and we'll aim to share that with the GSSB for next week. Next set of feedback is comments on language and terminology. So we had quite a lot of confusion, particularly in the workshops where we had time to explain and to talk this through about the SRS terminology and where this comes from and how it relates back to the GRI standards. So we had a discussion several months ago about moving beyond calling these SRSs in the text. Now they are referred to as GRI standards throughout the text. It is our recommendation, although certainly up, of course, for GSSB discussion and overriding, to support a simpler approach of calling these GRI standards rather than SRS standards or SRS numbered standards. And that would then also refer to the SRS reference claim as a GRI referenced claim. This is maybe a minor point, but we think it certainly in the field, these are already being referred to as GRI standards, and we've had very strong support for overall simplification of language as much as possible. So I would ask if we have any feedback or directional steering at this point, because it's one of the small changes, but that will affect drafting of every document.
Okay, thanks, Chelsea. Judy.
I just wanted to say I completely agree with this one, actually. It seems a very straightforward thing to do, and is probably what our users are going to be doing anyway. So we might as well just use the simplest, most straightforward, most communicative language we can come up with. And GRI standards and GRI reference claim seems to fit that bill to me. Thank you.
And I can see online that Nankuma agrees also. Kirsten?
Thank you. My only concern here is that this was an issue, the naming was an issue that we were talking a lot about, discussing a lot about. And as far as I can remember, but please tell me if I'm wrong, our concern then when we decided on the SRS was about the firewall and to make sure that we were able to distinguish between the two parts of the organization, and with the possibility of at some stage being able to demerge the two parts of the organization. Apart from that, I do suppose that people will call these GRI standards anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. I wonder, Dwight or Robin, whether you have any comment as you can't type in.
No, I mean, not for me. I mean, Robin, nothing in particular. I mean, either way, okay. I mean,
That's fine. Dwight?
My inclination is that people have sort of already given a name to it. Let's do it that way. I don't have a problem with either terminology.
Salima, I wonder if you have any comment at all?
Well, I just don't have a very strong feeling about either SRS or GRI standard, but I would consider what Kristen just said, that we should consider if the title will not generate some confusion about the wall between the two parts of GRI. But I don't have a strong feeling.
Thanks, Salima. I can see Stian is okay with the proposal. Daniel, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I just sent my comment via text, but I never much liked the SRS, and I just never liked the fact that it doesn't really sound GRI. It could be confusing. GRI is a universally recognized acronym, and I would agree fully with the GRI.
Okay, I think that's probably a pretty clear steer. There's a bit of hesitancy about the firewall and what message we're sending. Nonetheless, we recognise that GRI is a well-recognised brand, and people will probably continue to call them GRI no matter what we say. So I think that we're probably a consensus okay with going that route. From my personal view, I'm the same as those people who expressed some nervousness, but I guess accept that is how it is. Okay, so unless anyone has something else to add on that, shall we move on the basis that we do switch to GRI?
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That will make some team members here very happy. Okay, next point about language. We had positive feedback overall about distinguishing requirements versus recommendations and guidance. So I think the clarity there in terms of what we've done with the draft so far is really appreciated. And we've just been going through detailed comments on the instructive verbs coming through the online platform. And generally, we've had most agreement with the decisions that were made by the GSSB, with one or two exceptions. We'll highlight those to you for future review. We do have some concerns about language related to shall versus should, and some concerns particularly about translation and how those verbs translate. But on the other side of the fence, we have a number of stakeholders weighing in, recognizing that alignment with ISO terminology is probably our best bet at making sure that those terms can be universally understood and translatable, acknowledging that whatever verbs we pick, we are going to end up with some problems or some people not liking those. So our recommendation from the standards department is to keep the verbs shall versus should, recognizing that even if we were to change to must or need, we are still going to encounter different problems or feedback from different stakeholders. We did have a few concerns about replacing indicator with disclosure, and we would actually recommend, having looked at this in detail just the last day for many hours, we will make a recommendation to the GSSB that we revert back actually to indicator as opposed to disclosure, because we have some confusion from users about the difference between a disclosure, being the data points to be reported, versus reporting requirements about how to report that disclosure. So we have done some soul searching back to the origins of the decision to move away from indicator to disclosure, but I think actually we will have a better, clearer explanation of that term in the standards if we move back to indicator. We had no one commenting saying that they support the move to disclosure, but a number of people wanting us to revert back in the comments, although not an overwhelming majority. And I'm sure they could get used to disclosure as well. The last point about language I want to raise is topic versus aspect. Generally, this was well received, but we also need to do a little bit more clarification work in the glossary about how we're determining topic versus material topic, particularly to help those G4 users understand this in the new context. So we took on board some feedback there. So I would just ask maybe in light of the fact this discussion about indicator versus disclosure, Michael, if you want to just ask if anyone has any strong opposition to us reverting back to indicator in the next set of drafts that will come out. Now is a good time to raise that and give us the rationale. Otherwise, we will probably proceed with editing through that change.
Okay, first of all, can I ask people who, particularly those on the phone who aren't speaking, to make sure they're on mute, which I believe is *6. Kirsten, you wanted to say something?
Yeah. Even though I'm not very happy about the term disclosure, I still believe it's much better than indicator, because most of what we are talking about here aren't indicators. They are, at the best, they are many indicators put together. And as such, I do believe that disclosure is a much more correct term than indicator. It's confusing using indicators for these disclosures. I wish I could come up with a better word than disclosure, but so far not. My understanding when I read what was sent out yesterday on the slide deck was that there were no recommendations from the standards division to change back to indicator, but I might have been confused there. Thank you.
I think the recommendation was in formation yesterday and may be forthcoming next time around. Is my understanding of what Chelsea was saying. Judy, do you have a comment?
Very similar to Kirsten's, actually. I think I feel very similarly to her about this. I don't think disclosure is the most brilliant word in the world, but I do think it's better than indicator. There are many things that get lumped together under the word indicator, and I think it actually sows more confusion than clearing it up. So I won't add anything further to Kirsten's comment on that, because I think she put it very well. Thank you.
This is Dwight. I think disclosure is actually the right word. It's the most general word and consistent with the notion of transparency. Indicator, I think, has a very specific meaning that is not always what we want, and so therefore, you can disclose in a number of ways that a restaurant is not popular. But one of the ways might be an indicator, such as the number of empty seats at meal times. But that's what an indicator is. The general thing is of disclosure might involve other ways to reveal the same information, and I think that they're not interchangeable. One is a little more specific, and one is more general, and I think we need the more general word.
Okay, thanks, Dwight. Anyone else who's on the phone only like to make a comment? I think Salima, Robin?
Robin speaking. I would support totally Dwight's approach. Disclosure is a generic term. Indicator is a specific way of disclosing. Disclosure can entail narrative. Indicator is only a sort of quantitative disclosure.
Okay, thank you, Robin. And I see David and Kuma have similar views. So I wonder, Chelsea, were you suggesting that we have indicators and other disclosures, or were you suggesting that everything that is now called a disclosure become an indicator?
No, we certainly were not suggesting that we have indicator and disclosure. I think one of the main driver behind revisiting this, although don't worry, feedback from the GSB here is very clear and we will proceed with disclosure. The main challenge we're having is that there's a confusion about when you refer to a specific disclosure, disclosure 5051, when you use the term indicator, it's very clear to people that those are the set of data points or information, whether one or multiple, qualitative or quantitative, which is to be reported in the report. And that's probably coming from the established G4 user base as well. When we start referring to that as disclosure 5051, disclosure 20247, we have had more confusion, and we're struggling with this in the layout of the documents as well, about what does disclosure here relate to? Is it just the data points? Is it also the reporting requirements? In some cases, we have reporting requirements which actually, or recommendations which recommend additional information to be disclosed or reported, and therefore would that also be considered part of disclosure 5051 or 20147? So it is more about trying to make it clear the distinction between information to be reported or disclosed, the data points, the information in a report, versus the requirements that correspond to how that information is to be compiled, versus the recommendations for additional information to be reported. We have lots of very complicated nuance in these sections. However, it is not a problem for us to continue with disclosure. It's less work than reverting back, and we can continue to do that. I would challenge the GSSB that if you can think of a better term for us to consider over the next week or 2 weeks, please feel free to send us suggestions, because nobody is loving disclosure either. But point taken, and we'll move ahead with that one.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea. I think Selena might have dropped out. I'm not sure whether she's back and whether she has anything particular to add on this point. Okay, no.
I
All right.
apologize for the technical problems.
Okay. Terrific. Chelsea, back over to you, I think.
Okay. The next point to discuss before I turn it over to Lara is about SRS referenced claims. Hold on, we're having a problem with our clicker.
Just while you're doing that, can I just remind anyone on the phone particularly to mute themselves while they're not speaking? *6. Thanks.
Okay, the next point is to talk about feedback on the in accordance and SRS reference claims. So generally, we had good feedback about comments on clarifying the in accordance criteria. We had some very positive feedback on the rework of that section in the draft standards. And we have made further improvements on this over the last 6 weeks based on the workshop feedback. Mixed feedback on the SRS referenced option in general. So a few stakeholders want this emphasized more. We had a couple of comments that this is great to have a more piecemeal approach. However, some, and I would say probably 80% of the comments on this option were negative. Some want it removed altogether or deprioritized or more clearly delineated as a different option that is not at the same level as compiling an in accordance report. So those concerns are largely rooted in a worry that this will lead to cherry picking or selective use to use disclosures, or, for example, taking a different approach to define material issues and then simply using the GRI disclosures to report against those issues and calling it a GRI referenced report. We had a few comments, I think there's 4 or 5, that also wanted, if this option does continue, that we make it mandatory. Currently, it's a recommendation to apply the quality principles. However, there are a couple of comments that actually we should be less prescriptive with this. So I would just say, as I mentioned earlier, that the feedback about this option is coming largely from a really specific segment of the stakeholder base, which are existing G4 users or practitioners, and we might have had very different feedback about this option if we were to go talk to new reporters or those reporting using other frameworks where we'd like to see more alignment with specific information. So what have we done in the meantime? We have edited out Section 3 of the SRS 101 on claims. We have reduced duplication in the section, so we've very much shortened the intro section. We've taken out guidance from the table and left that guidance up front. And we've also given more rationale behind when each of these options might be appropriate and more distinction between using an SRS reference claim versus using the standards together to prepare an in accordance report. And additional points of editing we will mark very clearly for GSSB reviewers when the document is put up onto Annotate. So at this point, I think our recommendation is to leave the option in, certainly because we've had many discussions with the GSSB and we think it's important, but to clarify, and we've taken a first pass at this and we'll ask for your, of course, review and technical help here, how it is a different option and how it's intended to be used or when it's appropriate to be used.
Okay, thank you. I see, Judy, you have a question. Would you like to ask that, please?
Yes, I'd just like to point out that a few minutes ago we took a decision to drop the SRS language in favor of calling the standards GRI standards, and we would now be saying GRI referenced. And that exactly does bring up the potential problem that was on the previous slide where people sort of pick and choose a quite unrepresentative report that doesn't really embody the principles of GRI very well at all, and nevertheless calls it a GRI referenced report or GRI referenced disclosure. I would then also point out that before we adopted the SRS language, under G4, we have this option of GRI referenced disclosures and reports already. And all of this sort of adds up in my mind to I know I sound like a broken record here. I'm personally no fan of really almost anything about the in accordance framework. However, we have promised that we're not doing G5 by the back door, and making a substantial change to the in accordance framework without consultation would not be appropriate at this stage. So I think we should sort of keep it as it is, understanding the language would be GRI referenced. And we know that this issue is under consideration for our work plan going forward, and simply live with it on that basis. Thank you.
Judy, can I ask you a question on that? You're saying go with it as it is. Do you mean you're happy with the sort of simplification suggestions as you understand them recommended by staff at the moment, or are you saying that we should not do those?
I see. I think I'd probably be happy with the simplification recommendations that the staff are making. I don't think that they would totally or even mostly solve the problems that we have in this area, but I think I would go along with the recommendations that the Secretariat makes at this point.
Thank you. Does anyone on the phone only, would anyone like to make a comment? Dwight, Robin, Kirsten, Salima?
Kirsten, I would support the Standards Division's recommendation here to even clarify what the GRI, the SRS reference or GRI reference option is.
So, sorry, could I just ask you to repeat that? I could not catch that.
Yeah, sorry. I support the Standards Division recommendation about further clarifying what is meant with the SRS reference report, and then as best keep the SRS reference option in the standards. Was that clearer?
Yeah, yes, thank you. It was my listening rather than your speaking, I think, but yes, that's clear. Thank you. Dwight, Robin, or Salima, do you have a comment?
Well, this is Dwight. I think that...
I do have... Oh, sorry.
Dwight, please go ahead.
Basically, I think there is a need for clarification, so I think we need to attempt to see if we can clarify it without further confusing it. But so let's try to clarify it.
Thank you, Salima.
Yeah, I do support the standards division recommendation, but I would like to point out that I really think that we are reaching this point where we will have to discuss assurance. Because I've been part of some discussions about the standards and how to apply it in an early stage, and I've heard a lot about, well, how can the third party be assured, be secure that the principles were followed without a clear and precise instruction about assurance. So by now, I do support the standard division recommendation. I do support what Judy has said right now, but I really think that we should start to think to rediscuss how to approach assurance.
Thank you, Salima. And then Kuma, I see you've written a note. Would you care to articulate that briefly?
See, in my opinion, since we are now moving into a standard and it is no more a guidance document, the referencing is normally applicable to a guidance document, not a standard. So it can lead to a lot of complication and under-reporting or poor reporting, especially with reference to the existing SRS 101, 102 and 103. I feel that even if we are retaining this reference claim option, then we should make it very clear that 101, 102 and 103 are mandatory, without which it will result in a partial reporting or bad reporting. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else who'd like to comment on this issue? Okay, I guess what I'm hearing is that, and Nankuma may be a little bit different in his approach, but others who have spoken are basically saying, yes, we recognise this is a difficult issue, we recognise both sides of it as we always have. Let's look at the standards division recommendation. It appears to be heading in the right direction, and we'll see it in more flesh when we meet next. Is that a reasonable summation, Chelsea?
That sounds very reasonable.
Okay, shall we move to the next?
Yes, okay, I'm going to turn it over to Lara to take you through the next few points of feedback.
Okay, hello everyone. So the next area of feedback that we wanted to bring to your attention is on sectors. Just as a way of background, in the exposure drafts, we had proposed that the current sector disclosures would no longer be required to claim in accordance with the GRI standards. And in SRS 101 Foundation, we had a reference to the sector disclosures within the guidance and pointing users to the fact that they can use the sector disclosures as one of the inputs to the identification of material topics. The feedback we've heard from in nearly all workshops and also through the online and the offline feedback is that participants would actually like to see more recognition given to the use of the sector disclosures. And a few respondents actually suggested elevating the reference to the sector disclosures from guidance into a reporting recommendation. In addition to that, we have seen that quite a strong request from nearly all respondents that commented on this issue for GRI to do more work in this space and to offer sector-specific guidance to reporters. So our recommendation in this area would be sector disclosures into a recommendation in SRS 101. And this is not necessarily for a decision now, but we would like to get a sense of the GSSB as to whether you would support this recommendation.
Thanks, Lara. Do we have any comments on that? I can see some support from Judy on the notes. Anyone who's on the phone would like to make a comment particularly?
Would also support making it a recommendation.
Okay. I'm guessing there is support. Is anyone opposed to it? I think we can take that as support and move on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next area of feedback was on the effective date. Based on a release date of November 2016, it was proposed that the standards would become effective as of the 1st of January of 2018. We got quite some concerns with the effective date being too soon, as it only gives one reporting cycle to organizations to implement all of the relevant changes proposed. Some of the rationales given were that this is not enough time to make all of the relevant changes to internal IT and data collection systems. And also the translation of the standards into other languages was also seen as a challenge, since many reporters would need to wait for the translation of the standards to be able to implement all of the relevant changes. Based on this feedback, what we would recommend the GSSB is to consider moving the effective date back by an extra 6 months to the 1st of July of 2018, what would give more than 20 months to reporters to implement all of the proposed changes.
Thanks, Lara. Can I ask if anyone does not support? Oh, sorry, I've got a question there. Judy, the question.
Yeah, it's probably not really a question. I think my reaction to this is that I think I'm more sympathetic to the challenge based on translation. If you have to wait for translations, and I'm not clear off the top of my head how quickly those translations will come through, then I think there might be a bit of an issue. But because we have promised and worked very hard to hold the requirements to the same as or very similar to the existing G4. I'm not sure I completely buy that there's going to be a great deal of reorganization internally around the standards. I'm happy to be corrected on that, but that's my response at the moment.
Thanks, Judy. Any other comments? I see Nankuma is okay with this proposition. Kirsten. Salima, I think, was it?
Kirsten here. Oh, sorry. I do have an echo. Apologize.
Kirsten?
I do support to extend the deadline till 1st of July 2018. As I've said in our earlier discussions, I do believe that at least it will be regarded as a nuisance and an obstacle for many organizations to only have one grace year, while for other organizations they will be eager to change it or to transform to the standards as soon as possible. But I do respect that the viewpoint will be differing from different organizations there. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Salima.
Yeah, I'm just not buying this hurdle on complying with the standard related with the customization of data collection and the systems already in place to address G4 requirements. Although I can consider that translation process could also impact the timeline. Having said that, I do not agree with postponing the data of already defined.
Okay, thanks, Salima. So, Salima, can I just ask what you see as the downside of extending the deadline?
Sorry, can you repeat, Michael? I'm having trouble to listen you clearly.
Sorry, can you outline what you see as the danger if we do extend it an extra 6 months? Is there what? Because I can understand that you can't have this going on indefinitely, and the shorter the time, the better. But in some sense, in my mind, it is somewhat arbitrary. And if some people are saying that they need that extra time, whether we agree or not, or whether we think it's because of translation, that it's not a great danger in allowing it to be extended 6 months. Do you see a potential danger or threat if we do allow it to be extended that 6 months?
Yeah, it's a feeling because with 6 more months, we will reach almost 2 years from this discussion to start to allow the companies to start to use the GRI standards. I really think that's too much time. Actually, in the beginning, I was voting for a shorter period of time to start to use the standards because of everything. It's so quickly done nowadays, and I really think that almost 2 years is too much time. So I can live with 1.5 years, but I really think that 20 months, and we are not changing a lot of the content of the G4. I realize that the translation process could take more time, but still this argument that the data collection will be impacted by the new standard, the content is not whole new, right?
Okay, thank you for that. There are some other comments in here from others. I see Daniel is happy to extend, as is Stian and David. Understanding, Judy, you have some reservations, and Salima, you have reservations. I think, Judy, do you want to add to it? I see you've got something else here. Do you want to add to it a little bit more?
It was simply to say that under the old paradigm, we would probably already have introduced a whole new G5 by now, and the burden of implementing that would have been vastly greater than the sort of format change that the shift to standards largely represents. I do accept that 6 months is not such a huge difference, an enormous delay, that it would necessarily pose a great risk to GRI. So I won't necessarily stand in the way of the shift in the timeline, but I don't actually see the implementation burden as being so great in this case. Thank you.
Thank you. And Hadimi, who's having difficulty speaking, but has sent a note saying that, especially for users of translated versions, change is too frequent. It depends on the timeline of translation, but he generally supports extension. I think by weight of numbers, we're probably supporting the extension. Maybe we can re-challenge that when we meet in person, but unless anyone has something else to add, then I think maybe we should move on the basis we are extending it, recognising that some members have reservations.
This is Dwight. I just want to identify with the view Judy has.
Thanks, Dwight. Okay, back to the Standards Division. Laura, you continue?
Yes, thank you. The next topic is the management approach standard and the topic boundary. For the management approach standard, we got overall positive feedback on the proposed changes, especially on the fact that the management approach has been presented as a standalone standard. Few respondents think that this will give much more importance to the management approach, and it will likely increase reporting on this element. Also, very much welcome relocating the grievance mechanisms and the topic boundary into the management approach standard, as well as has also been welcomed the new section on general requirements on how to combine disclosures for a group of topics or how to report the management approach in case there isn't one in place. In terms of areas of improvement for the management approach, we got a number of very good suggestions on how to improve the structure of the standard, for example, by including a summary of the disclosures at front and by moving the section on general requirements at the beginning. Also, very good suggestions on how to improve and clarify wording in some places, which we will implement in the coming days. And although most of the feedback was positive. We did get a few comments with concerns on the level of detail being requested by the management approach standard, as well as the lengthy and unbalanced guidance in this standard. But generally, we've seen a very positive feedback on all of the changes introduced in this standard. Also, the bulk of the concerns with regards to the management approach had to do with the topic boundary, where we have seen that respondents want an even more simplified explanation of the topic boundary. We will be covering the topic boundary in much more detail next, but first I just want to stop here to see if there's any comments from the GSSB on the feedback on the management approach. We will be implementing all of the changes and suggestions coming out of the public comment in the coming days, and the designated GSSB reviewers will receive an improved version of this standard next week.
Okay, thanks, Lara. Any comments on that discussion so far? Okay, I think we're free to go on.
Okay, thank you. So for the topic boundary, what we have seen is that overall there was positive feedback on the fact that GRI was making an effort in clarifying the description of the topic boundary, so very welcome effort. However, respondents thought that the revised description of the topic boundary was still too complicated, too technical, and too detailed. Among the comments received, respondents thought that the disclosure was too complicated, especially the requirement to list all of the entities that cause the impact for each material topic, as well as their geographical location. That was seen too complex, especially for large multinational companies. Also, terminology was seen as too complicated and technical, not only the concept of topic boundary, but also the notions of inside and outside. And a few respondents actually asked for more prosaic formulations or more direct questions for the topic boundary. So instead of asking, report the topic boundary, why don't ask who is causing the impact? Also, quite consistent feedback from the workshops and the online and the offline feedback that examples of how to define and report the topic boundary would be very much appreciated, as well as visual and graphic solutions for representing the topic boundary. There were quite a few respondents in the workshops and also through the online consultation platform who thought that taking a value chain approach for explaining the topic boundary would be a much more simpler exercise than the notion of inside and outside. We have put together a proposal for how to simplify the topic boundary based on the public feedback, which I will present in a few moments. But before that, we want to present to you the outcomes of research we have been doing in-house to see how the concept of topic boundary is understood and applied in practice by reporters. And this will hopefully help substantiate any changes you might want to make to the topic boundary disclosure. And for that, I will hand over to my colleague Jenny, who will present the outcomes of that research.
So hello everyone. My name is Jenny Puroila and I work at the Standards Division as a research analyst. I would like to present you the results of the internal research that we conducted on the topic boundary. The intention of this research was to have a look how the boundary concept is understood and applied in the current reporting practices. And the results seem to be very much aligned with the public feedback that Laura just presented. We had a look at the 30 different sustainability reports from the largest public companies that are reporting in accordance with the G4 guidelines. In case you're interested in the details and the full list of companies in the sample, this can be found in the annex of this presentation. Within this sample, 5 companies do not report on the boundaries at all. Among the remaining 25 companies that use the concept, there are wide variations in how the concept is interpreted and applied in reporting. From this sample, none of the reports fully complies with the intention of the boundary concept as defined in the G4 guidelines. One of the key findings was that many of the reports use the value chain approach by describing the boundaries along the value chain. Descriptions of where the boundaries are remain, though, in a very high level, and for example, they are listing stakeholder groups or parts of the value chain. Only 3 out of the 30 mentioned location, otherwise the descriptions were on a very high level. So looking at the different interpretations of the boundary, we identified 3 different ways to interpret the concept. Boundary either means where the impacts occur, the scope of reporting, or stakeholder groups which consider the topic material relevant or important. In addition to these 3 main categories, a small number of reports were basically just listing stakeholders or indicating whether the boundary is internal or external without any explanation of these lists. So 37% of the reports fall into the first category where the impacts occur, which is understood as impacts on the different parts of the value chain or impacts on the stakeholders and business operations. However, the term value chain is described differently in each of the reports. The second biggest category, covering 23% of the sample, interprets boundary as a reporting scope, referring to where the data of the reporting is collected. The companies within the third category, they link the boundaries to their materiality assessment and indicate stakeholder groups that consider the topic material, important, or relevant, and they name this exercise as a boundary. And here are a few visual examples that represent these different approaches and also show the level of detail about the boundaries. The example shown in the bottom right corner is a visual presentation of the value chain approach, showing the significance of the impact on the value chain. The example on the left side uses these small icons to show the impact on business unit, region, and stakeholder group. And the example on the upper right corner makes the distinction between inside and outside the organization and reflects to whom the issue is material. Outside boundary shows both the stakeholders to whom the topic is material and also the value chain stage. More examples and actual citations and quotes from the report can be found also in the annex of this presentation. And to summarize the findings of this research, this table here highlights how the certain elements from the G4 guidelines are used in reporting on boundaries. To recap, 37% of the reports understand the concept as where the impacts occur. The level of detail in providing information about the entities is low. Instead, commonly the entities are listed by mentioning the different stakeholder groups or operations in a very high level. The only specifying characteristic that is mentioned, and only in 3 cases, is the geographical location. All right. So this was it, the brief results. So thank you for listening to this brief presentation. And I will hand over again back to Laura, who will continue with this subject from here on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. So based on the public feedback and the outcome of the research that Jenny has presented, we would like to put forward a proposal for simplifying the topic boundary for you to have an initial discussion on during this call. The proposal would be to simplify the disclosure based on a value chain approach the disclosure would be rephrased in terms of an explanation of which entities in the organization and/or in the value chain cause the significant impacts related to the material topic. With this proposal, we would lose the notion of inside or outside in the benefit of a value chain approach, although this notion of inside and outside could be covered in the guidance for the disclosure if deemed appropriate. With this proposal, we would also lose the requirement to provide the geographical location for each of the entities that cause the impact. And also within the guidance of the disclosure, we would propose that the actual entities wouldn't need to be listed, but they could be grouped according to the attributes of those entities. For example, they could be grouped by location, by type of entity, or by position in the value chain. We would, of course, revise the guidance accordingly. This is not presented to you now for discussion, but it's under development at the moment. And with this, I would hand it over to you, Michael, to get any initial reactions or comments from the GSSB on whether they would support this revised approach. But this is not necessarily for approval now.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Jenny. That was quite a good presentation, quite helpful. I can see, Judy, you have a comment. I'll just first of all ask if anyone who's on the phone, Dwight, Kirsten, Robin, or Salima, would you like to make a comment first?
Yeah, this is Dwight. The whole idea, I think, of the GRI was not only the benefit of transparency, but also to sort of assist organizations in becoming better organizations with respect to society. And I think that my feeling about this is we more or less have the boundary idea correct, but we need to sort of explain it better and to get reporting organizations to understand what it is. We're obviously not doing that. So obviously I would support more work on this, but I'm not so sure that value chain is right. The reason for that is it's largely first of all, it's a business concept. It's not necessarily a concept for all organizations. But more importantly, I think that there are impacts that go beyond business relationships, and they would not be captured, I think, by the value chain approach. So I don't want to discourage working on this or coming up with things. I think it's pretty clear that we haven't got it right in terms of transmitting what we're trying to get reporters to do. So I think we need to work on it, but I'm not so sure that the value chain at the end of the day is going to be the thing, because it limits the scope of impacts that would have to be considered.
Thanks, Dwight. Can I just ask a point of clarification, perhaps, of Laura? In the slide that we have on the screen, we talk about a value chain approach, but in the box, the blue box, your explanation, I think that's the wording you're suggesting, doesn't mention value chain. It mentions which entities in the organisation and/or in its value. Also, it does mention value chain, but it's which entities in the organisation and/or in its value chain cause significant impacts. So sorry, it does mention. Can I get back to Dwight then? Is that not okay? It's not singularly value chain. It's entities in the organisation and/or in its value chain cause the significant impacts.
This is Laura. So just to confirm, yes, we're looking at impacts that the organization causes directly, as well as impacts caused in the value chain. So we are still retaining the concept of inside and outside. The concept of inside is quite well understood by organizations. It is more the concept of outside and how far you go in assessing impacts that's complicated. And what we have heard is that the value chain approach is much more well understood and widely applied applied by companies than the notion of inside and outside. And just to Dwight's point, it would be helpful for us at the standards division to get an example of an impact that wouldn't be covered by the sentence on the slide.
Michael, this is Chelsea. Can I add a quick clarification here?
Please.
We are proposing to include still the guidance, although it has been revised and simplified, which talks about impacts that the organization causes, contributes to, or is linked to, and that still references the same references, the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises and the UN guiding principles that are in the current exposure draft. So this is simply a simplification of the actual text in the disclosure, but we would be keeping those concepts in the guidance below it. And if you want to see an example of the current G4 reporting requirements, to Judy's point, they're in the annex of this slide deck. We can actually bring that up right now to have a look at. So it doesn't take us too far away, but what we're hearing at the workshops is that to make this content in the disclosures more easily understandable and relatable for reporters, that they are latching on to, they understand this already in terms of value chain, and they're asking for us to bring that language in as well. Now, whether or not we do that now or whether we save it for future reviews of boundaries is really up for GSSB input.
Thank you for that. I can see Judy, I think, is supporting what you're saying, Chelsea, and I think Nankuma is too. I'll come back to them in a second, but I think it was either or both Salima or Kirsten had a comment. Whoever has put us on mute with music today, please turn that off. Thank you.
Hello?
Salima?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Hello.
I do have a lot of concerns by changing supply chain. Can I speak?
Salima, we're hearing you, but we're also hearing someone else in the background. Sounds like they're trying to join the call and saying hello. I wonder if they could mute themselves.
I think it's Dwight. Yes, it is Dwight.
Can anybody hear me?
Is it Dwight? Is it?
It is Dwight, but I get the impression you cannot hear me.
I can sort of hear. I can hear you now. I don't know whether you had made a substantive comment other than the one that we did hear previously, but I'll come back to you.
I made a comment, and then you asked a question, and then I lost contact, and I've been trying to get back into the conversation.
Okay, thank you, Dwight. I understand now. So can we hear from Salima, and we'll come back to you, Dwight, in a second.
Okay, thank you. I do have a huge concern about changing supply chain to value chain, and with this change on no need to indicate the geographic location of each entity. I do agree that in the majority of the cases of global companies, the geographic location of each entity that is part of their supply chain wouldn't be feasible, but the global companies, they do pose a huge impact geographically by groups of suppliers more than for groups of customers, for instance. So I would recommend a kind of, by simplifying the disclosure, not changing the G4 and explaining in a more plain way what is expected by a reporter to report about their impact on supply chain. And in fact, in my experience, the companies are not being able to report their initiatives to manage social, environmental, and governance impacts on their supply chain. It's not because the concept is not clear enough. It's because they are facing some difficulties to identify those impacts and to manage them. Here in Brazil, corruption is a huge thing from the 3 years, for the past 3 years, because the public attorney is prosecuting every single company involved in corruption schemes. And even though the whole a process involving corruption and big supply chains, some reports from those companies are not disclosing their impact on the suppliers. And corruption is a material topic for sure. So I don't want to extend my argument right now. I would recommend for a more simple and clarification about concept, but not changing supply chain for value chain. And because this is how we can improve the ability of reporters to a better understanding about their impact on their suppliers and support them to be more transparent about their performance. Thank you.
Thank you, Selima. Can I ask maybe Laura or Chelsea? Sorry, I'm behind on my understanding of the language here, but I would have thought value chain encompasses supply chain, but it's sort of both up and down from the organisation. Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, that's correct. So it would include activities upstream and downstream, including the supply chain.
Selima, can I just check with you then, if it does include and is quite explicit about the supply chain, the downstream being included as well as the upstream, is that okay for you?
Yeah, it would be if we could allow if we highlight the weight of the impact of the supply chain on the organization and of the impact of the organization on the supply chain. For instance, labor. This is a huge issue downstream because, of course, the companies are reporting whatever they do know about their customers because it's more important to them, to some companies, to keep track and record about environmental and social performance of their customers. But about material topics such as, I don't know, gender or equal payment or labor and health and safety, in my experience, the companies do not have records on those type of topics on their suppliers. And this is the kind of aspect or topic where it's a huge impact from global organizations.
Okay, thank you. I think...
No, just complimenting and responding directly to your question. No, I couldn't leave with the value chain, but replicating the importance of the suppliers and the identification, management, the impact on suppliers.
Okay, thanks, Selima. I'm just conscious of the time. We've only got about 7 minutes left. Can we just revert? I'm sure staff, the Standards Division have heard what you said, Selima. Dwight, can we just come back to your point?
Very brief. Value chain is better than supply chain because it's broader in scope. My concern, however, is that the reporting is on externalities and it may not involve the value chain. It may be broader than that. And so, well, that's all for the minutes we have.
Okay, I get that point, and I recall actually you made a similar point in the last meeting now, and that's jogging my memory. So, again, can I ask the Standards Division to take to be conscious of that when drafting? I can see that Nankuma is basically supporting the approach. Do others have comments they would like to make on this issue?
Yeah, Kirsten has a comment. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Kirsten, please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. I am happy with the proposed changes from the Standards Division, but I have one suggestion for further improvement, and that is to substitute entities in the text with parts or something similar. And the reason for that is that it can be entities, but it can also be geography. It can be process steps, etc. And so, while entities is very legal entity like, and that is not the most efficient way of reporting in many cases. So I suggest to substitute entities with part, or a better word, and give a good definition of what we mean with that word, to include the different kind of well, the different parts that can have consequences for the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. I can also see that Ademi is saying he generally supports the idea, but if impact is made in specific locations or by specific business segments, disclosure on these should be recommended. Judy, you have a comment. Would you like to just articulate that briefly?
Yes, actually, Bill, I've got a couple of comments about this particular topic, and one is to say that I think it's quite possible that the three different approaches that the research that Jenny shared with us flagged up could actually all be quite legitimate, and we shouldn't necessarily say that one is better than the other, but there's a little bit more discussion to be had about that, which we can have in August. I'm pretty content with this proposal and be happy to go along with it, and also the remainder of the slides I'm quite happy with. And I just wanted to say that I do need to leave straight away at 1:30, so if I do leave a bit early, it's with my apologies, and I hope we will have concluded the vast majority of what we need to by then. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. I don't think, can I just check with Chelsea or Bastian, we don't have any formal decisions to make?
No, that's correct, Michael. So I think we've gotten the initial input that's very useful for us here, and Lara will work on further iterations to this, and we also have examples we've developed for the guidance, so that will come out for the GSSB next week to look at in the context of the revised management approach. This was more of an initial feeling out any high-level concerns or direction changes at this point.
Okay, thank you. Can we, I know that there is a lot more to be said on this, but can we maybe hold that until, I think you've got some really good input from the people who have spoken. If others have anything particular they want to say on this, can I ask you to maybe send an email to the Standards Division? Can we maybe skip to the timeline now?
Sure. So on slide 24, you had a running list of other areas of feedback where we would like to discuss this with you at a later date. So going straight into the timeline and next steps, here you can see the timeline that has already been presented and discussed with you. We just want to simply remind you of the key dates for you to review updated documents. So starting next week, Wednesday, we will be posting updated versions of the standards together with the public feedback on Annotate, and we will be notifying each of the GSSB reviewers when that document is up on Annotate. The period for review will run from the 27th of July until the 10th of August. So that is the moment for you to review all of the documents that you have volunteered for. On the 4th of August, we will have another GSSB call to run through additional public feedback areas, including any items that you want to raise based on your review of the documents and the public feedback. Following your review of the documents, we will have about 4 working days to go through all of your comments and make all of the necessary adjustments to the documents. And currently, we are due to submit the final draft standards for your approval on the 16th of August. So that will be the next window for you to have a last look at the draft standards before the in-person meeting at the end of August. And we would ask you to please submit any final comments comments on the draft standards by the 23rd of August to Michael and the Standards Division.
Okay, thank you, Lara. That's clear and pressing. Okay, we've pretty much reached the end of our time. Can I just check with Bastian, Chelsea, others in the Standards Division, is there anything you would like to add at this point?
Not from my end, Michael.
No, this is Bastian. No, this is. Thank you very much for waiting with us through all these questions, and we have direction for the next days. No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. And is there anything from other members who are on the line? No? Okay.
Yeah, to me, Robin.
Excellent. So it's, okay, it's Daniel? No, you're okay. All right. Well, I think that's, we've reached the end of the time and we've covered everything in the agenda. So I think we should call it quits now and look forward to receiving those documents and urging our guests from me to make sure we get onto those documents as quickly as we can. It would be better for staff, I imagine, to get any comments we have earlier rather than later in that period, 27 July to 10 August. So with that urging, I will now close the meeting. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much, all of you.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Michael. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.